Okay, so welcome everyone. I hope everyone's having a very enjoyable conference so far. Hope you've managed to make some new friends, meet some old ones, to learn some lessons from different countries and to speak with created entities. So it's my pleasure today to introduce a 1-hour session on ecosystems and ecosystem services. This is a very important result area, and as you can see, we've been given the privilege of hosting this in the biggest room here. It's so big I can't see anyone at the back, but hopefully you'll be able to also contribute and ask some questions. We have a WOVA app. Looking forward to seeing some people put comments on there or answer the poll. And before I start, I just wondered how many people here have ecosystem projects. It's very difficult to see, but as any entities or any NDAs or countries have existing ecosystem projects? It looks like no one's putting their hand up. So we have no ecosystem projects here. Okay, I see a few over there. Okay. And anyone interested in developing new ecosystem projects for your country or your AE? Yes, our panel members should put their hands up. Couple of people. Okay, so after the presentation, I will be sharing my email address. Anyone's welcome to contact me afterwards and I can put you in touch with my colleagues. So I will go ahead now with the presentation and introduce the agenda. Very happy to be here today with my 3 highly esteemed colleagues from entities that work with us quite a lot. They are very good members of the GCF family. I know we appreciate the projects that they're developing or developed already, and also learning from the experiences that they have learned in the field. And the session today is going to look at GCF's 4-pronged approaches that were mentioned in the first day by Yannick, the Executive Director. And these are planning, transformational planning, catalyzing innovation, looking at building success through knowledge and coalitions, and also mobilizing finance at scale. So I will be talking a bit about mobilizing finance at scale. The second panelist member is Jessica, who's the head of the Climate Change Adaptation Unit from UN Environment based in Nairobi, who'll be talking about an example of transformational planning and programming based on a project that UNEP are undertaking in Gambia. The third presenter will be Dirk, who's the Climate Finance Director of SPC, which is a regional DAE called the Pacific Community. And he'll be talking about catalyzing climate innovation, and particularly how we work with local people and local society to develop innovations. And the final panel member is Pierre-Yves Gudes from International Fund for Agricultural Development, who's the Senior Climate Finance Specialist. And he'll be talking a bit about the regional support program of the Great Green Wall project that was approved in January this year, and talking about building coalitions and knowledge to scale up success. And I'm not sure I introduced myself, but I'm an ecosystem management advisor for GCF. Been working for a 1.5 years in Songdo. Okay, so we only have a limited time today, so we can only scratch on the surface of these major issues. So I hope you will learn a few things, and also we'll have some questions to ask. So firstly, what are ecosystem services? Why are they so important? As you saw from the notes for the workshop, over 49% of the world's GDP depends upon ecosystem services. That was highlighted in a report from 2020 by McKinsey. It's been estimated at providing $44 trillion of services every year. But even though we have these very large figures, and we can see that the world's economy and peoples are dependent upon ecosystems, there's still enormous funding gap. The gap between up to 2050 from 2020 is estimated at trillions of dollars. The annual gap is hundreds of billions. So there's an enormous gap of financial need that we need to invest in the ecosystem sector. If you look at the graph on the screen, between 2020 and 2021, there's been a slight increase, only about 1% in overall investments. This probably goes down if we now take into account the inflationary pressures that are around the world. And the biggest investor in ecosystem services is the public sector, which is the large dark blue fields. The light blue is private sector, and there's a small line in there which is official overseas development assistance, which I guess the GCF will fall under. So there's huge gaps. Most of it is coming from the public sector, and I think the public sector is very important. Dirk may have some comments on this from working with governments and local communities. So we need to think of innovative types of projects and try to utilize the GCF funding very well and work with the dark blue line, public sector, and also the light blue line, private sector. And if you look at the GCS portfolio of projects around the world, currently there is over $1 billion of projects which report on the ecosystem service results area. It's 70 odd projects, and the portfolio stretches from grasslands in Mongolia to Amazon forests to Pacific ecosystems to African desert areas and grasslands. So we cover the whole world, but there's still a lot more need of investment in countries, as has just been highlighted through the previous panel talking about ecosystem national development planning. These are some examples of projects that we have. The information is on the website about the projects, but we also need to rely upon the entities and national authorities to also start communicating results, lessons learned in the country, and also to private sector and to other entities within the country and also regionally. This is a graph that shows the type of projects that GCF is investing in ecosystems, agriculture, and forest and land use. And one of the strengths of GCF is that we are very diverse in the types of investment mechanisms that we can do, ranging from grants to loans, to equity, to guarantees. Most of the projects we have are grants in both ocean, agriculture, and forests and land use. And we're looking for ways to be more innovative with grants. GCF has a publication that will be released, I think, soon, on how grants can be used in innovative ways, which would be very useful for entities to help develop projects. We have some projects, if you look at the top row, that are looking at equity, the third column, but not very many. And guarantees, which is the column on the right. There's only a few small projects that are looking at this. There was one approved in agriculture and agricultural ecosystems with Tanzania Bank earlier this year. And also the Amazon Bioeconomy Fund also uses a number of different range of instruments. Countries are very different, from Pacific countries to Brazil to India. So these systems, these different array of investments may not work in every country. Equity is a very specialized type of investment. Many of the smaller countries may not have the businesses that are able to take on board large amounts of equity or large loans, but there are small enterprises that can that we can work with to develop larger pipelines and also to invest to help develop market opportunities for small business and communities. These are some examples of 3 types of projects. Pierre will be talking about the regional support program, which is part of the IFED iGreenfin 1 project that was approved at Board 31. But one of the innovative aspects of this project is that it is working to support lines of credits to farmers, farm enterprises for agriculture and also ecosystem restoration. And it's supported with a technical assistance facility. One of the previous questions was, should GCF have a new type of modality, a public-private sector project? Well, this in a way is perhaps a combination. It's working with the private sector, the banks, but it's also a public sector project with a large amounts of technical assistance, which is needed for these countries. And this is providing money directly to smallholder farmers. Only 1.2% of the world's climate finance actually reaches smallholder farmers. It's a very small amount of budget. Another type of project is the Amazon Bioeconomy Fund. This is working with the private sector and communities to develop income streams for ecosystem restoration, forest conservation, and value chains that come from forests. This is an interesting project to look at. It's on the GCF website, has very good strategy, climate change analysis, and some of the value chain work in there is very innovative and very useful. This also includes guarantees, which, as I mentioned in the previous slide, there aren't many examples of it being utilized yet. And the third example is an equity fund called the Pegasus Global Fund for Coral Reefs. This is investing in medium-sized business in, I think, about 18 countries, which are part of the 50 resilient reefs in the world. Many countries won't have these types of investments available for investment yet, but they'll have much smaller scale. So some projects may want to try to develop pipelines for future equity investments or bonds. This is quite interesting financial mechanism because it's looking at investing in ways to make coral reefs more resilient to climate change, looking at ecotourism, sustainable fisheries, and reducing waste and runoff, which is a big impact on coral reefs. And I'd also like to draw your attention to the sector guides. There are 8 sector guides. This is the ecosystems one. It's shown on the GCF website, and it highlights a number of different issues. First of all, it highlights the linkage of ecosystem services to different sectors. In the GEF, ecosystem services are a cross-cutting issue, the same as gender or private sector finance and capacity building. And if you look at infrastructure, cities, water, agriculture, forestry, and land use, they're all related to ecosystem services. And this highlights some of those links. It also highlights innovative financial mechanisms. It highlights approaches for planning, for innovation, and shows some of the examples of projects from both GCF and outside. I would suggest this is very useful to look at. And in terms of new ways of mobilizing finance, there's a very interesting presentation today, this morning, on debt swaps, which could be a potential area to look at. We have a presentation at 4 o'clock on blue carbon, which is a way of also monetizing how we work with seagrass and mangroves, and providing an extra income stream for communities and countries to enhance and protect these ecosystems. We heard yesterday from the Fundo Mexicana, who are looking at payments for ecosystem services. And there's also insurance, which might be a new mechanism for countries to really include in projects in the future. So that was just a very quick overview and introduction. And I'm going to hand over now to Jessica, who's going to talk about the Gambia project.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Troney. I work for the UN Environment Programme unit based in Nairobi. I'm very pleased to participate in this session. Thank you, Chris, for inviting me. So UNIT was established in 1972 as a sort of watchdog and global advocate for the environment, and with the coordinator of environment in the UN system. We have a new medium-term strategy, has 3 strategic areas. Number 1, living with harmony in nature. Number 2, climate stability. And 3, towards a pollution-free planet. In terms of the Green Climate Fund, we're supporting 5 funded activities in the ecosystem services space. Gambia is one of them. Benin, Paraguay, Laos, and Bahrain are the 4 others. So I'm going to talk to you about Gambia. I've got 7 minutes, so I'm going to be as efficient as I can. This project was started in 2017. It's executed by the Ministry of Environment, Climate and Natural Resources. It has 3 outcomes. Outcome 1 is about large-scale restoration. Outcome 2 is about establishing natural resource-based enterprises. And number 3 is about institutional strengthening to scale the approach up. And all of this done within a 6-year period with a grant of $20 million. So we've reached the midway mark as of December 2020. And what you have there is a table with the planned targets and where we got to at the midway mark. So the planned target was to restore 10,000 hectares, 3,000 of which would be in agricultural areas. We managed to restore 7,700 hectares, largely because the project used assisted natural regeneration. Actual planting effort was less successful and harder than we had planned because of the challenges of planting material availability, water for seedling growth, and bushfires. In terms of direct beneficiaries, the midway mark was much lower than we had planned. We had planned for 11,000 direct beneficiaries, and we reached just short of 3,000 direct beneficiaries. And the participation of women was much lower than we had planned as well. So we're supporting the ministry to beef up the project management unit and to recruit experts that can really push this agenda forward in the most effective way. And in terms of establishing natural resource-based enterprises, the plan was to establish 176 by the project end. We've managed to, at midway point, establish 30. It's much slower, and the delay has been because the planting effort, the restoration effort was slow to get off the ground. So training and capacity development has been a key feature of this project. And that table shows what the training figures have been like, both at the level of local government authorities, at the level of the technical officers, and at the community level. And from 2021, you can see the figures have ramped up. So as of December 2020, 1,600 people were trained in various thematic areas. And to the left there are quotes from the midterm review. Training has been a keystone of the project. Training capacity development activities have been welcome, useful, and effective. Farmers have welcomed the training provided in farming techniques, and it was an eye-opener for many farmers on how they could deploy techniques that could help them adapt and protect against climate change. So this is the Gambia. It's a small country in West Africa. It's the length of it, well, in the middle of it is the River Gambia. It runs for about 480 kilometers inland. And on either side of the River Gambia, the distance north and south is between 25 to 50 kilometers. So it's a small country. It opens out into the Atlantic Ocean, and that opening is about 60 kilometers. Population is about 2.5 million. Population density is around 225 people per kilometer squared, and the median age is under 20. So there's a big population pressure in the Gambia. Those green areas are the community forest areas. We're operating in 4 of the 7 regions in the Gambia, and those community forest areas, there are about 114 of them. Comprising 136 settlements around those forest areas, and with about 5,400 households living in and around those areas. The main challenge was really, apart from the planting effort, to cluster these community forest areas so that they would be big enough as collection areas for the natural resource-based enterprises. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see that very clearly, but essentially this was the strategy for the natural resource-based enterprises. And by the way, the ministry was supported quite well by ICRAF, the World Agroforestry Centre, who really gave a lot of technical support in the planting effort and in developing this sort of a plan. So the idea is that you have sustainable forest enterprises as the primary enterprises, so comprising of beekeeping, wild fruit, sustainable firewood, nursery enterprises, and they lead to secondary enterprises like furniture manufacturing, food processing, baobab bioprospecting, which then would feed urban demand for these products and also the export of those products. And so the strategy also comprises setting up multi-purpose centres to assemble, process and package. We've got 7 of those or 8 of those centres established, and then a retail company was set up to market those products. The idea is also that the collection of these forest products is sustainable, they're non-consumptive. So for example, with firewood, it's collected from the forest floor, from the fire break areas, from woodlots that were established, and over time transitioning to agroforestry systems. So the progress at midpoint is 60 new beekeeping enterprises have been established, and a local community-based organisation was contracted as the extension service provider. Enterprise development plans were developed for 30 new sustainable forest collection enterprises. The procurement for a processing, packaging and sales facility for enterprises in Andropicon grass was implemented. Andropicon grass is used as livestock fodder. The river company was established to retail products from the regions and to foster entrepreneurship and business support. We're developing a forest certification system for forestry products with the Gambia Standards Bureau, and we're constructing, rehabilitating 8 multi-purpose centres. So in terms of impact to scalability, I like to think of this as a shell, as concentric circles. The core of it was the restoration protocols, then also the community mobilization, then it was the village land use planning, the community forest planning, then business plan development, then training and procurement of the enterprise equipment, coming out into what we hope will be a scaling up of the approach to all 7 country regions and all rural communities. But there are many barriers, and we recently commissioned a scoping report to help understand where the barriers to mainstreaming this approach are and what our strategy should be. So human resource gaps are really critical in the Gambia. Department of Agriculture, Department of Livestock, they have 2 vets. They really need experts on animal nutrition, and rangeland management, for example. Parks and Wildlife, they have 4 degree educated professionals, but they really need experts on ecology, terrestrial ecology, biology, wildlife management, GIS mapping, and so on. So those are critical resource gaps. And because of those critical resource gaps, communication and coordination between government departments is lacking. And what that often leads to is competition for resources. It also leads to fuzzy zones between regulations and policies never being resolved, which leads to poor enforcement of policies. Although there are references in policies to ecosystem-based adaptation, there are no details on what those models would be. And so we're hoping that we can address that with this project. Financing gaps are, of course, critical. We did an analysis of the amount of development budget that was available in the Ministry of Agriculture and in the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources. And we found that over a 4-year period, 2018 to 2022, the annual development budget ranged from 20 million to $60 million per year, most of that being donor funding. Then, of course, there are lots of barriers at the farmer level. Chemical fertilizer is subsidized, so that's obviously a key disincentive to the ecosystem-based approach. Organic matter is, on the other hand, constrained, which doesn't help conservation agriculture. The cost of zero tillage equipment is often prohibitive. And of course, there are established practices that we have to break through and awareness levels that we have to raise. So we have our work cut out, and we're supporting the ministry now to develop a work plan to address these barriers. Things like mainstreaming EBA into the National Development Plan that's being currently developed, into the next round of sector strategies, integrating EBA into the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs budget circular and guidelines to the ministries, training of planning cadres across different ministries on the EBA approach, and updating and aligning the 2018 Forest Act with the new 2022 forest policy. And then another slide on sustainability challenges. We have faced many in this project, some of which were not planned for sure. Wildfires affecting seedling survival, pests and diseases, transhuman grazing, a really important issue in the Gambia because it is surrounded by Senegal and it is, after all, a wetland area. So when there are droughts, you have a lot of cross-border transhuman grazing coming into the Gambia, and that often causes conflict. Human-wildlife conflict, this was an interesting one. In dry conditions, the River Gambia becomes saline and hippos migrate upwards, and so they come into contact with farmers. And then low levels of entrepreneurship characterized by weak market access, low levels of innovation, and weak business networks. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you. Interesting. Okay, very interesting. Also interesting that the evaluation said that the villagers said it was an eye-opener for them to learn about participatory approaches and climate change. We sometimes forget about who are the beneficiaries, and it's very important to document what they're saying and the results. And now I'll hand over to Dirk, who's going to talk about innovation.
Thanks very much, Chris. Malo Elele, and a warm Pacific greetings to everybody. We weren't asked to speak about or highlight a project per se, but rather just the importance of adopting a people-centered approach and how that can catalyze innovation, particularly when looking at adaptation generally and more specifically on ecosystems. And so we thought to start off with looking at innovation and what it means in the Pacific. When doing ecosystems, when looking at people-centered approaches, you have to understand your context foremost, because that's the context, that's the ecosystems within which you're working, the communities within which you're working. And so just to, having a brief look at our blue Pacific continent, the largest continent in the world, and thought to highlight just the distances involved from the migration across the continent over hundreds of years, which the distance from the point of origin, which is Southeast Asia, to the farthest point in Rapa Nui is around 15,000 kilometers. So just for context, that would mean all of us getting on the plane here, flying to Istanbul, and then flying straight back again. And that's the distance involved. And obviously, you've got a lot of diversity in the different areas, whether it's from the high mountains in Papua New Guinea down to the low atolls in Kiribati. And so across these different areas, you need constant innovation, firstly, to get there. And so we see lots of innovation in terms of the different approaches taken in how to migrate across the continent, from the different sailing techniques, and then also the navigation use of maps and innovative ways to be able to figure out where you're going. And again, just an interesting point, that migration actually occurred against the trade winds. So the prevailing winds were in the face of the explorers, and yet managed to navigate using all these innovative approaches. And once they arrive in a new island, a new context, a new ecosystem, once again adopting innovation to adapt to that situation and be able to survive and indeed thrive. And so we see interesting techniques, including, for example, pulaka cultivation in low atolls. We see fishing techniques and things that we call innovation today, aquaculture and hydroponics. And this is basically what has been happening for hundreds of years in different areas in the Pacific. And so it's approaches that are innovative and have been innovative for centuries. So the point here being that innovation is natural to everyday life and has been in the Pacific for so long. And so recognizing this, highlighting an initiative, this is not a GCF project, but it's a regional partnership amongst a number of organizations, and talking to the point of adopting a people-centered approach and looking at ecosystems to address societal challenges, including climate change as the primary challenge facing our generation, as well as other challenges. And so the Kiwa initiative is a regional initiative with a number of partners, including those represented here. And it's recognizing the importance, so it's using nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based approaches, recognizing the importance of our ecosystems, but also our people, and how we can use innovative approaches with focusing on the people-centered approach, but harvesting and tapping into the natural resources and the opportunities they provide, while at the same time protecting them and safeguarding them for future generations. And so the Kiwa initiative has windows including for individual countries and territories, as well as groups, so regional or multi-country projects. And it's based on requests from communities or from governments for addressing their needs using smaller grants. So it's not one big project, but small grants to address individual areas. And so by doing this, it's improving access for nature-based solutions as a means of building resilience, sustainable management of land and marine ecosystems, and using those to address climate change. And very important here again in the Kiwa is that there's a lot of coordination between different partners, different countries, and always adopting this very people-centered approach at the center of all the efforts. And so looking away from this one initiative to the region more broadly, we find it quite interesting when you look at all the different projects from particularly our regional and national DAEs in the Pacific. There's a big focus, those titles there are titles of projects or concept notes from Pacific DAEs, all using the enhancing direct access modality. And we think that this is a particularly innovative approach. There's a reason, I think, why there's such high interest from the Pacific in these projects. And that's because we think that they're really fit for purpose in terms of communities being able to identify their needs, relying on traditional knowledges and traditional practices in the region to be able to identify needs, but then also propose innovative solutions to these, and being able to tailor that to individual communities, working through whether it's local government, working through community organizations, faith-based organizations, and NGOs who are able to through their work adopt that people-centered approach to identifying needs, and then developing solutions, designing the solutions around that are focused on addressing those needs. These cover a whole range of the GCF focal areas. Our colleagues from MCT are working on an EBA-EDA, so an ecosystem-based adaptation enhancing direct access program. And we think that sort of suits perfectly with the theme of the discussion today, looking at how this people-centered approach through the EDA modality can also tap into the ecosystem-based approaches in terms of building resilience. I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That was excellent. And we must remember that the world is very diverse and different, and certainly the Pacific Islands have very unique constraints in implementation, tiny countries, huge, vast areas, but also amazing ecosystems. And obviously innovative people from what you've described. And maybe now we hand over to Pia.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pierre-Yves Guédez, and I work in IFAD. Many thanks, Chris, for the invitation and the opportunity to be here in the panel today and present you the work that we have done with the GCF on an initiative which is called the Great Green Wall. So for those of you who are not familiar yet with this initiative, it has been created before the GCF. It was launched 15 years ago, basically, under the leadership of the African Union, with the support of the Pan-African Agency for the Great Green Wall. And basically, it's an initiative which is covering 11 countries around the Sahel and the Sahara. The primary objective of this initiative was to slow down deforestation and to reverse, not deforestation, desertification. So the main goal of this initiative are listed on this slide. Basically, they are to restore 100 million hectares of degraded land, sequester 250 million tons of carbon, and create 10 million green jobs by 2030. So this is the Great Green Wall initiative as it is. In September 2020, so fairly recently, a ministerial meeting was organized with all the ministers of the Great Green Wall countries, the 11 countries. During this meeting, the UNCCD launched a report, a stocktake report of the progresses achieved by this initiative. And in this report, they highlighted, obviously, the progresses and a couple of challenges which are hampering the proper implementation of this initiative. Some of those challenges were related to the lack of coordination, lack of sharing of information between countries and between Great Green Wall entities, lack of a proper structure to improve the way knowledge and innovation is managed, lack of or absence of a knowledge management system or framework to report on the collective achievements between all the countries on this initiative. And linked to the launch of this report, a ministerial declaration was issued. So all the ministers of the Great Green Wall countries signed this declaration, ratifying again or reaffirming the fact that this initiative, this regional initiative, remains a top priority for all the countries. And very importantly, all the ministers also invited partners such as the GCF, the GEF, FAO, World Bank, and others to enhance their support to the Great Green Wall initiative and create an umbrella program to guide this process. As a result of this ministerial declaration in September 2020, the One Planet Summit was organized in France, beginning of 2021. And during this summit, a lot of international organizations reaffirmed their commitment to better coordinate and enhance their efforts to the Great Green Wall initiative. The Great Green Wall Accelerator was launched. So this accelerator, basically, today it is hosted temporarily by the UNCCD, and its objective is to support the Great Green Wall Pan-African Agency in the coordination of this initiative, in the coordination of the partnership, bringing in private sector, mobilizing financial resources, and tracking how those financial resources are transforming into reality and impact on the ground. This is what the accelerator is doing. It is structured around 5 pillars. You can see them on the website of the accelerator, but in summary, those pillars are organized around sustainable agriculture and value chain, ecosystem restoration, a topic of today, infrastructure and renewable energy, enabling environment for private sector engagement, and capacity building. Those are the 5 pillars of this accelerator, which is basically structuring the M&E framework of the Great Green Wall initiative now. During this One Planet Summit, $19 billion have been pledged by different partners to support or to speed up the implementation of this initiative. And now the accelerator is keeping track of those pledges and assessing how those pledges are transforming into reality. So how the GCF reacted to this call for support coming from the 11 countries. Basically, the GCF created with the support of IFAD and other partners, the regional support program, which is presented here. So this program was elaborated in 2021 with all the GCF NDAs, the Great Green Wall focal points in countries and at regional level, all the Great Green Wall entities, so the World Bank, FAO, SEALS, and OSS, which are direct access entities and others, as well as representative of the private sector. This regional support program has been approved already by the GCF board. This was in March earlier this year. And if you want to have more details about this regional support program, I invite you to check or to read the FP 183. The component 3 is focused on this regional support program. So the vision of this regional support program is to enhance knowledge management and innovation across all the GCF projects and programs in the 11 countries. And this is very different in terms of structure or approach compared to what the GCF has been doing so far. As you know, GCF is working through accredited entities to implement funding proposals, which are very project specific. Yesterday, we discussed about the limitation of this project by project approach. This regional support program brings this new idea of creating bridges between GCF projects, independently of the accredited entity implementing the project or independently of the countries. So this is what this regional support program will intend to do, create those bridges between countries and between GCF projects to enhance the way information, innovation, best practices are shared across the participants. As of today, and please correct me if I am wrong, I think that there are approximately 60 projects approved by the GCF in the 11 countries, and they are being implemented by 18, I think, or 20 different accredited entities. So these 59 or 60 projects and different accredited entities, as of today, by design, they are not necessarily talking to each other. And this is what the regional support program will intend to remedy in a way. So this regional support program is intended to foster learning, knowledge management, and innovation to increase accessibility of best practices. It will pilot a new approach to increase the collective impact of all those individual GCF projects. It has the potential to be replicated in other ecosystem or landscape, obviously. And it will also support the aggregation of the consolidation of the results achieved by all those GCF investments in the 11 countries to be able to report to the accelerator and to the 11 countries. One interesting feature of this regional support program is that it is not focused only on the GCF. It is also linked to the GEF. And we heard the presentation yesterday from the GEF talking about this long-term vision of collaboration between GCF and GEF. And this regional support program will play a role in implementing in a large landscape this long-term vision of concrete collaboration. As of now, we are elaborating a similar approach with the GCF regional support program with the GEF. They are mimicking each other, and we are creating those systematic bridges between GCF and GEF projects. Who are going to be the beneficiaries of this regional support program? And I will end with that. First, all the GCF NDAs, because this program will be implemented through additional human resources located in the offices of NDAs, basically, to facilitate the work of NDAs in capturing or systematizing lessons related to GCF and GEF projects, but also GEF and Great Greenwald focal points, accredited entities, including direct accredited entities and executing entities. That's all in a summary. Chris, many thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Pierre. And the bigger number of 59 projects also includes readiness projects. That's why it's so big. It's smaller for projects and programs. But that also reminds me to say that readiness can be highly useful for developing innovative financial modalities or preparing the preparation for bigger projects. So, for example, in Dominica, I think it's GDGI been developing a financial vehicle with the governments there, and that's going to be fundamental in a project that is currently being developed by UNEP, very integral to the UNEP project when that is further developed next year. So we have 12 minutes, so we have a few time for some questions, and I have one question received on WOVA. I think this question I asked Dirk, and it's how important. See, my computer's just gone off. Dear. 1 second. It's about innovation and what are the major challenges facing direct access entities and executing entities to find unconventional or innovative activities to implement EBA?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the major challenge would not be that the innovation isn't there or that we don't, we don't have an idea of what could be done in a certain situation. I think particularly when it comes to something like funding for that, it's being able to demonstrate to someone who's reviewing a proposal, whether it's, within an EDA program or, alternatively, when you're trying to submit to GCF or GEF or Adaptation Fund, being able to demonstrate that what you're doing is going to address the problem. When you're talking about innovation, it's something, by definition, it's something new, something that hasn't been tried. And then so to be able to convince someone that this new technique is definitely going to work without 10 or 20 years of cost benefit analyses or, some kind of study that proves that this will be effective. I think that's a big challenge. The solutions are there, but you don't necessarily have the evidence base to be able to convince someone that this is the way to go forward. Thank you.
That's a good answer. I think behavior change is also a big challenge for implementing innovation. If you think farmers maybe have been practicing some type of land use for hundreds and hundreds of years, so changing something is very difficult. So, for example, in Vietnam, farmers have been farming rice for hundreds of years. It's culturally ingrained into the culture, society, and ethos of farmers. But in many areas where you have salinization, they have to look for new approaches. So that might be melon. Melon might be the innovation, but to change that behavior in a farmer requires extension, focused extension, capacity building, etc. So another question for Pierre is how innovative is the regional support program? Is this a type of modality that could be applied to other biomes or regions in GCF's family? And also, what are the challenges of communicating success and failure? Is communication of failure or where lessons learned need to be highlighted more?
Okay. Many thanks, Chris. Great question indeed. I believe that as I was saying in my presentation, one of the innovation of this regional support program is its approach. It is very different compared to what the GCF is doing today, which is project by project. On this case, we are deliberately trying to create bridges between projects. So one accredited entity can learn from another, an NDA can learn from another, or between countries. So this is clearly a distinctive feature of this project compared to every funding proposal, all the funding proposal approved so far by the GCF. So this is clearly something new, which has clearly the potential to be replicated, in the Amazon basin or in the Caribbean or similar ecosystem like that. It is done already in some multi-country project financed by the GCF, but this is limited to one accredited entity, ensuring this exchange of information between the different countries within the same, managed by the same accredited entity. So this is clearly different. In terms of challenges, I would say that in many projects, knowledge management is not a top priority. There are many investments on the field, but and there are a lot of obligation when we implement GCF projects. And in many cases, knowledge management is really not the top priority. So project management unit don't necessarily have a strong knowledge management strategy, a knowledge management expert, let's say. So this regional support program will liaise with those knowledge management experts in the different projects when they are, and creating the time to systematize the knowledge, to share it, etc., is not necessarily part of the work of a project management unit. So creating this time is a challenge in most projects, and finding the best way to communicate this knowledge to different audiences is part of the challenges. It is obvious that measuring the impact of such an approach is going to be complex. So this is why in this funding proposal, we have included funds specifically to create a robust methodology, mimicking basically the knowledge management strategy of the GCF, which is extremely good, to be able to define the baseline and have a systematic approach to measure this impact. So a lot is to be created, but I think it is a very exciting prospect and different way of visualizing GCF implementation on the ground.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it's a very innovative way, and it's the sort of mechanism that we're looking at to try to replicate as under the title of like a co-investment platform, which has some of knowledge learning and project development and enabling in different regions, like the Pacific is one we're starting to look at. So Jessica, the Gambia project did a lot of planning and capacity building, and you highlighted the importance of that. How important is capacity building and planning for the success of forest restoration projects? One of the reasons I say this is because I look on the internet and I see very large carbon projects that are planned by various different financial mechanisms. I don't know how they can implement in the areas like you've discussed, Gambia, so quickly. So from my perspective, I think planning is very important, but often entities, financial agencies, they want to move very quickly. Yeah. But how important is a planning approach for long-term success?
It's working. Okay, yeah, you can't run ahead of the communities. So I think, and we're all guilty of this, you know, we design projects with very ambitious targets in year 1, in year 2, and it's simply not possible to deliver that. You have to work at the pace of communities. Often communities need a lot of support to establish themselves organizationally, to establish leaders in the group, provide training. And training is not just a one-off event. You often have to have consultative dialogue processes over many months. And you know, the lower the capacity in the country, the more you have to put into that process to get the best out of the project. So you know, I think working through government, working through the regional structures, the administrative structures is really important as well. So there's various levels at which capacity development and support of organizations and processes needs to happen. The other thing is also, as I mentioned, planting materials. It's simple things like, where are you going to get your seedlings from? For large-scale restoration. When we started the project in Gambia, we realized that I think there was 2 functional nurseries. We had to invest in another 7, and now those nurseries are actually businesses in themselves. They're supplying seedlings to other projects, but all of that takes time. Hence, we've had to request a 2-year extension for the project, but it will benefit the outcomes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's very good. So we only have 4 minutes left now. So maybe you can give me 1-minute highlights of the future projects that IFAD, SPC and UNEP are going to be developing and proposing to GCF in the next year or so. maybe starting with Jessica. Maybe not all of them because you have quite a large portfolio, but what cool ecosystem projects do we look forward to at GCF?
Okay, so you mentioned Dominica, so let me start with that. So that one's using nature-based solutions to protect the island coastal communities against hurricanes. And again, working with the ministry as the executing entity. We've got another good one that's developing in Mozambique, and that's looking at disaster risk reduction and supporting coastal communities that have their livelihoods affected by salinity, to help those communities to survive cyclones and to transition towards saline tolerant livelihoods by use of nature-based solutions, but also for events that are greater than a 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 year event, to support them with early warning systems and preparedness. In Ghana, we're looking at nature-based solutions in the northern savanna regions to mitigate against droughts and floods. Flood events are equally as important in the northern savanna zone. And yeah, we have a debt for nature swap in East Swatini, tied to integrated catchment plan management, and so on. So our basic approach is to develop EBA models that others then can adapt, replicate, scale up in their own context. And really that comes from UNEP's mandate as a global advocate for environment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Dirk, can you give an elevator pitch?
Yeah, I think, well, the first one would be it's not an ecosystem project, but the Vanuatu water security project, which is going to board next month, hopefully. We keeping an eye on the emails now, looking for ITAP comments and all that type of thing. But then looking ahead more broadly, there are a couple that are quite exciting. I've mentioned EDAs, and we've got 2 or 3 EDAs that currently, are in development, either in funding proposal or concept note stage, and some additional requests from countries. And we, those a lot of those have got ecosystem based elements in that, where there's interest from communities for that. We've got a climate resilient agricultural project looking at agro ecosystems across 3 countries in the Pacific. So I think there's quite a bit, there's interest on the Ridge to Reef, the Jeff Ridge to Reef initiative that was running in the Pacific, and upscaling that. So I think, in the broader ecosystem space, there's quite a few interesting things that we're working on, and hopefully we'll reach your email inboxes in the next year or so.
Okay, thank you, and good luck with the board meeting and ITAP decision. Excellent. Pia?
Many thanks, Chris. I think I will highlight two of those projects. The first one is related to eGriffin that you mentioned before. So working with development banks to promote credit lines for adaptation action. We are working on a new one, but this time which will be submitted to the private sector facility of the GCF. So basically to do the same type of work, creating credit lines for adaptation action and ecosystem restoration, but with private bank, this time in Southern Africa. So this is the first one. The second one is the support that we are providing to Asian countries in the elaboration of a 10-year investment plan on peatlands, so peatland protection and peatland restoration, and ACE-free sustainable land management. So this will probably lead to an interesting GCF project also.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the last one sounds very interesting, and I believe we've got a meeting about that today, I think. And that's also a good example of learning from GEF projects, which is also very good. So some GEF projects can be upscaled through GCF. Okay, so it says here end, so we managed to finish just on time, unlike the last group. So congratulations to my panel. Thank you very much. Good luck with project development, and good luck to everyone. Thank you for attending today, and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference today, and the people who are attending the private sector one for the next 2 days as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.